month, which would pave the way for a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU. The Prime Minister indicated the in-out vote could follow as early as June if agreement is reached at a summit in February. Here's our political correspondent, Ross Hawkins.
Decision day could be just months away. David Cameron as clear as he's been today about when he'll get a say on the European Union. Does he expect a referendum in the summer?
That is, that is what I'd like to see, is a deal in February and then a referendum that would follow. But, you're dealing with complex negotiations.
That deal in February would be made at a European leaders meeting in Brussels, which could mean a vote in June. But if his complex negotiations fail, it might be September or even next year before Britain finally votes. And if they do fail, David Cameron says he rules nothing out. But he sounded a lot like a man expecting to stay in when he was asked on the telly if his government was prepared for Britain to leave.
I don't think that is the right answer for the reasons I've given. But were that to be the answer, we would have to do everything necessary to make that work. This is, we put it in the manifesto. It's the public that will decide this, not the politician.
That hasn't pleased some Tories who'll campaign to leave and who think civil servants should be preparing so they're ready if that happens.
He said this morning there's no plans for Brexit. Now, this is actually disgraceful, but there are no plans for Brexit. And that's really, really serious because it's a very complicated operation to carry out if it happens.
And I'm told there is growing disquiet among Eurosceptic cabinet ministers that while pro-Europeans are encouraged to speak, they, for the time being, are kept quiet. Some influential Tories say even though he insists he'll stay in his job, whatever the result, if Britain does vote to leave the EU, a Prime Minister who campaigned to stay in could be forced from Downing Street. Ross Hawkins, BBC News.
Joining us now is Robert Oxley from the Vote Leave campaign, who believes the UK should exit the EU. Thank you very much for joining us. How can you have made your mind up already before we even know what the reforms are?
Well, I started very hopeful that David Cameron might achieve, fundamental change. The kind of promises where he said that he's going to bring powers back from Brussels, that he would do things like ending the supremacy of EU law, returning control to the UK. I think many people start off with that, hopefully. But if you actually look at what the Prime Minister is asking for, it is minimal at best, trivial to be more honest about what he's asking in that renegotiation. So if you realise that the maximum of what the Prime Minister can achieve won't actually change many things, then it's absolutely that many people will arrive to the conclusion that the renegotiation, rather than being a genuine attempt to change our relationship, is more about presentation, and that actually the only safe option, the only way to kind of get powers back, is to vote leave.
But if you had the chance to be in part of that negotiation, what would you be aiming for that would convince you that Britain should stay in the EU?
Well, I think many voters are moderate, but they've got Euroscepticism and they've got unhappiness, say, about the fact that we hand over £350 million to Brussels each week. They won't like the fact that actually the politicians that we elect don't make many of the key decisions that we choose. In fact, those decisions have been handed over to Brussels, and increasingly those powers are handed over to Brussels. And then if you look at
handed over though to MEPs that we actually vote for.
Yes, but MEPs who are consistently outvoted within the European Parliament. And the danger that you have in the European Parliament is that you have the socialist kind of left on the European Parliament always votes with the right in the European Parliament at a European level, because their main agenda is more Europe. It's never actually, when Britain tries to block something, it doesn't get its voice. So actually, the idea that somehow MEPs are our democratic representatives there, yes, we elect them, but our voice is not heard, particularly at an EU level, and certainly when the interests, say if it's in the city or in terms of regulations over businesses or in terms of just simple decisions about how we work with people, those aren't protected. So I don't think that system is working.
How compromised is your campaign to exit the EU by the fact that the Prime Minister clearly wants us to stay in?
Well, I think, let's be clear, it is good that we now can see that David Cameron has only got one thing on his agenda, and that is staying in. He's not credible in terms of saying that he wants out. He wants to stay in at all costs. And I think, if you are being honest about what that means, it's a risky option. It's about more integration in the Eurozone, more powers to Brussels, everything that has effectively been waiting for them to do, and now that if you say we will vote to remain, is a green light for some of the worst excesses to continue. So I do think that there is a increasingly stark choice for voters between voting leave, taking back control, or voting remain and handing more power across to Brussels.
But I mean, what he is trying to do is ensure that those non-Euro countries are treated with parity. I'm sure that's one of the many things he would say if he was sitting here. Should he resign if he's on the losing side?
Well, I think that will be a decision for MPs, and they will have different views on that. But what we do know is that, in terms of the Eurozone outs or the red card for parliaments or this issues on migrant benefits, they are all very trivial changes, which say, as the OBR, the Chancellor's own advisors, admit won't actually fundamentally change things. They won't even affect migration flows. So what we know is that the renegotiation is very much about spin. It's very much about presenting something. But will it actually bring powers back? No, it will not. Will it fundamentally change the relationship? No, it will not. Will it be backed by treaty change, which actually makes the changes permanent? No, it will not.
Robert Oxley, that sounds like a clip for a news bulletin from the Vote Leave campaign.
Let's hope.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.